Hello, my friends. Today there is a lot of news and several important statements to go over, but let's start with the situation on the front line since the Russians are slowly advancing. We'll begin with the Kostyantynivka direction, one of the most difficult areas right now. Russian forces continue pushing toward, Bila Hora, storming Delivka, Щербинівка, Новоспасське, and Yablonivka. In Yablonivka specifically, they are advancing street by street. They are also attacking Poltavka to widen the flank in preparation for a future encirclement of Kostyantynivka. Shelling continues non-stop and FPV drones are being used extremely actively. Geolocation footage on the map shows an overwhelming number of videos proving that Russian troops are trying to control the entire area with FPV drones. So moving forward here is incredibly difficult. In the Pokrovsk direction. And this situation is worsening. The Russians are breaking through toward Novoekonomichne, storming Myrolюбівка and Lysivka, and pushing forward in the areas of Kotlene, Udachne, and Novosergiyevka. But things are particularly bad near Malinivka. Ukraine hasn't officially confirmed a breakthrough yet, but unfortunately, Russia claims its forces have already reached the outskirts of the village of Koptive. The Ukrainian forces are pushing them out and not allowing them to gain a foothold, so this area remains a gray zone. And as we know, the Ukrainian military typically no longer stays in gray zones, they likely operate there only with FPV drones. Because of this, the Russian advance is continuing gradually and they are trying to encircle the area. Meanwhile, Russian forces are also continuing to heavily shell Pokrovsk and other populated areas. In the Novopavlivka direction, things are also going very badly. Russian forces continue to assault villages of Horikhove, Zelený Kut, and Komar. And according to soldiers on the ground, the situation is as follows. Novopavlivka direction. The Russians have reached the border of Dnipropetrovsk region from the lower reaches of the Vovcha River. Zelený Kut and Novoukrainka are now surrounded from the south, which means the Russians will likely begin heavy strikes on the garrisons still holding those villages. They also be able to control logistics routes through Dachne. According to the fighters, the only reasonable option now is to pull the troops back across the regional border and establish a defensive line from the south, with an auxiliary flank on the east to prevent the Russians from striking from behind. They say the reason for the retreats and the unfavorable positions being taken is simple. Over all these years, no one from the top has lifted a finger to properly fortify the Novopavlivka area. And then we wonder why the Russians are advancing so quickly and pushing from different angles into Dnipropetrovsk region. The answer is clear. It seems like no one gives a damn about Donetsk region anymore. The fighters themselves don't even understand what they are defending, since nobody has their back. Yes, morale is low, because when you are retreating, you're on your own. If you want to live, you dig in. If your vehicle breaks down, you fix it yourself or ask civilians for help. That's how we are fighting near. That's how we are fighting. Near Komar, the Russians are also advancing from the east, south, and southeast. The fighting is still ongoing, and our guys are holding the line with sheer grit. But the entire settlement is under constant attack from aircraft, artillery, and multiple times of drones. These kinds of statement from Ukrainian soldiers show the desperation of the current situation. And sadly, it's all true. The situation is catastrophic. Meanwhile, Russian military bloggers are claiming that their forces have already broken into Dnipropetrovsk region from two directions. Russian troops have breached the border of Dnipropetrovsk region in another location. The 114th Guards Motor Rifle Brigade has entered the region near the settlement of Dachne. Earlier, it was reported that fighters from the 55th Motor Rifle Brigade and the 90th Tank Division of the Center Group had also moved into the region, advancing toward the settlement of Novopavlivka. In the area around Velika Novosilka, Russian forces are pushing near the villages of Burlatske, attacking Vilne Pole, and launching offensive operations from Novosilka and the village of Vesele. However, there have been no confirmed changes in their positions over the past 24 hours. In the Gulay-Pole direction, the Russians continue to shell Ukrainian positions and are assault on the village of Malinivka. So far, Ukrainian side hasn't officially confirmed any Russian advances, but Ukrainian soldiers have posted videos showing them eliminating Russian forces closer to the village. This suggests that the Russians have likely managed to advance slightly and that direct assaults on the village may begin soon. So the situation here is also starting to deteriorate. In effect, Russian forces have managed to open up a new axis of attack and are beginning to move forward again. In the Zaporizhia direction, Russian forces are assaulting Novodanilivka, Novoandriivka, and Stepove. They're also carrying out shelling, but there have been no confirmed changes in positions over the past 24 hours. Additionally, there were new reports of explosions in Melitopol last night, though no details have been released yet. In the Kherson direction, the Russians continue attacking the islands and are heavily shelling the entire right bank using both artillery and FPV drones. However, there have been no changes in the situation over the last day, but Russian troop movements and equipment transfers have also been observed again in the Kherson area. In the Siversk direction, Russian forces are assaulting Grigorivka and pushing near Verkhnyokamyansk, and they are doing so quite actively. However, for now, the Ukrainian forces continue to repel the attacks, and there have been no changes to the front line over the past 24 hours. In the Liman direction, Russian troops are attacking Karpivka, Zelena Dolina, Yampolivka, Zarichne, and Druzhelyubivka. Despite their high level of activity, they haven't been able to advance further here, and the fighting continues. In the Borova direction, Russian forces are assaulting Zeleny High and pushing in the area around Raigorodka. However, activity here is minimal and the front line remains unchanged for now. In the Kupiansk direction, attacks on Stepova Novoselivka continue and shelling of Kupiansk is ongoing. Still, there have been no changes in the situation over the past 24 hours. In the Dvorichna direction, Russian forces are attempting to push toward Kutkivka, but they've had no success so far and the front line remains stable. In the Kharkiv direction, Russian activity has slightly increased as Russian troops attempt to break through near Liptsi and continue shelling the area. However, there have been no changes along the front line in the past 24 hours. In the Vovchansk area, attacks also continue, but the Ukrainian forces are successfully repelling them and the situation remains stable. In the Sumy direction, the front line remains stable for now, but new advances are expected soon as even Ukrainian armed forces soldiers are reporting that the situation is actually much worse than officially stated. The Russians control nearly half of the elevated terrain east and northeast of Sumy. Here is the timeline of events. Initially, logistics problems forced our troops to withdraw from Suja. There were hopes that we could hold the border area, albeit on Russian territory, and contain Russian vastly superior forces. But the situation didn't improve. Logistics were still totally screwed, and now the fighting is happening on our own territory. That said, the Russians don't currently have enough manpower or resources to launch a direct assault on Sumy. Could they get close enough to the regional center to bombard it with a wide range of weapons? Yes, that's possible if urgent and comprehensive countermeasures aren't taken. It seems like something is being done, but honestly, it's too late. A delay of several weeks is something we simply can't afford. Some people are still asking whether the Russians have launched its summer campaign. Can't you see? They already have, and they started back in April. The first results are already visible on the map, and the situation doesn't look good in the Kostyantynivka, Pokrovsk, and Siversk directions either. As we can see, Ukrainian armed forces soldiers continue to speak the hard truth from the front lines. Meanwhile, President Zelensky once again stated that Russia has no intention of ending the war and that Putin's goals remain Odessa and the border with Moldova.
Russian military plans clearly point to this region Odessa, then on to the border with Moldova and Romania. Of course, we need protection now, but even more than that, we need long-term guarantees that this will never happen again. That's why I urge all of you to treat post-war security guarantees not as a formality, but as a real, practical necessity.
And overall, this is confirmed by Putin's own statements that they continue to ramp up arms deliveries to the combat zones.
Let me remind you, back in April this year, we discussed how to increase the volume of deliveries and improve the effectiveness of weapons and equipment used to achieve the objectives of the special military operation. The measures planned then are being implemented. However, these measures are essentially operational in nature and are being carried out as quickly as possible in real time based on current needs. Today, our task is to develop a new long-term program covering the entire range of weapon systems and models, including, first and foremost, advanced ones. We must maximize the use of experience from the special military operation and various regional conflicts. It's also important to consider global trends in military technology development, especially since the number of countries actively working in this area is growing. We need to start preparing infrastructure for new weapon systems, including bases, arsenals, airfields, and so on. The necessary financial resources for building and upgrading these facilities must be secured as a separate line in the program. From the experience of the special military operation, aviation of the aerospace forces makes a significant contribution to destroying enemy targets. Therefore, the state program being developed should include a comprehensive set of systematic and consistent measures for creating, purchasing for the needs of the Russian armed forces, upgrading, and repairing aviation equipment and aviation strike weapons. At the same time, the dominant force in conducting modern military operations of any scale and intensity remains the ground forces. It is important to quickly build up their combat capabilities, create a strong foundation for development, and ensure the development of advanced weapon systems and models with the highest tactical and technical characteristics and modernization potential. And, of course, the new state armament program must become an effective tool for implementing the recently approved strategy for the development of the Navy until 2050. It is also necessary to increase the export potential of domestic weapons and equipment.
Today marks 2 weeks since Trump set his deadline, saying that in 2 weeks we'd see whether Putin wants peace. But as it's clear now, it's obvious to everyone that Putin wants to keep fighting, and Trump still hasn't imposed sanctions. Although, honestly, sanctions probably won't change much, and imposing sanctions definitely won't stop Putin. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and See you next time. Bye-bye.